Lectures will be given by Professor Diana Skegan from the University of Buenos Aires, and today's lectures will be on structural color. So let us welcome our speaker.
So thank you all for coming to this afternoon session. The topic of my two lectures this afternoon is completely different to what I told you yesterday. I can say that not 100% sure, but almost sure that no equations in all of this presentation. So just relax and enjoy images and everything. I will be talking today about basically about nature. Structures that nature knows how to build much better and with much more imagination than we do. And so the whole message of this first part will be just to take nature as an inspiration source for our purposes, for our devices, for our imagination. So the outline of the talk of this first part is more or less what I summarized here. First of all, I will give you some data about the history of this topic. Then I will talk about two different kinds of generating color in nature. Basically, these two kinds, one kind is the focus of my talk, which is structural color. But the other kind is also very widespread in nature, which is color generated by pigments. So I will talk about the differences between them and everything. Then I will give some examples of structural color in nature. And then we will go from nature to artificial materials, that we already have some introduction on this topic. So we will see how the structures that nature offers us can be used to create new photonic structures. And finally, I will summarize all of it. So let's start with the history. So the questions that scientists try to answer when they have seen many species, of natural species of different kinds of animals, insects, even rocks. They try to answer why all these species have these very beautiful characteristics. So there were different attempts to answer these questions. Some of them, the most important, are summarized here. For example, Wood, that is very well known for his research on diffraction gratings, he said something like this: not only are the existing theories inadequate to explain the phenomena, but these colors cannot be explained by any of the common laws of optics with which we are familiar. So there was something going on there that could not be fully explained. This was written in 1919, so a century ago, more or less. And at that time, there were many different points of view arising. So Michelson, who is also very well known, he said something like this: it is somewhat surprising to find that the contrary view is still held by eminent naturalists and it is hoped that further evidences here presented may serve to emphasize the distinction between metallic or surface colors and the remaining classes of colors, for example, interferences, diffraction, and everything. Because the thing was that many samples exhibit like a metallic color, but of course they are not composed of metal. So there was some controversy on that too. Also Lord Rayleigh, that everybody knows too, said, "It is singular that the explanation of some of the most striking and beautiful of optical phenomena should be still matters of controversy." So it was somehow a topic where no conclusion could be found at that time. Why was that like this? Why they were not being not able to explain the origin of colors? So the main reason was this one. The only means of observation available at that time was traditional photonic microscopy. So they were not able to see, to characterize the structures and to see what is really inside this biological or natural structure. So then they tried to explain with the elements that they have. They could do some simple optics experiments with polarization, with mirrors, with diffraction gratings, but they did not have access to a real observation of the structures. So, for example, here, this is an image of a scale of a morpho butterfly. It's a species of butterfly. And I'm not sure if you can see this, but there are like lines, like stria that are all along this scale, which is summarized here. One can clearly distinguish longitudinal striae and even square patterns sometimes, in some cases, which immediately reminds of a grape. Hence, some people was supporting the theory of the diffraction grating that was generating this kind of color. So basically, two trends, two factions emerged to explain this controversy. One was led by Michelson, and his hypothesis was that the colors result from absorption and selective reflection of a metallic type. So what does it mean? That this theory is very simple. Just the structures absorb certain wavelengths and reflect some other part of the spectrum, and then because of this effect, you get the color that you perceive. So in this case, if it results from absorption, he said it is not necessary to carry a minute observation of scales, since the atomic or molecular origin of the colors rules out any kind of visualization. Basically, he's saying that it's a chemical origin. In this case, the other faction, led by Lord Rayleigh, he was exactly the opposite. He said extremely precise microscopic observation and outside drawings of the scales of a great number of butterflies and of sections like they did thanks to rather rudimentary microtones. So they put a very, very big effort to have as accurate as possible representation of the structure of the scales, in this case of a butterfly. So the main argument which was in favor of this theory was that the alteration or even the total disappearance of colors when scales are immersed in a liquid with an adequate optical index. This means that they were taking out this structure and putting it inside, immersed in a liquid with an appropriate refraction index, and then become transparent or the colors disappear. So this was not something that was inside a chemical absorption, but a structural effect. So another approach, another way of explaining the colors that appear in some other species is the scattering by small particles. This is another phenomenon that takes place not only in natural species, but in other physical systems. And so when these particles are small enough, they only scatter the shortest wavelengths, purple and blue, and the longest being transmitted and eventually absorbed by deep layers. So this is another way of selecting colors and reflecting only part of the visible spectrum. So basically, in this scheme, what we are trying to explain is that structures and pigments share the visible spectrum for the production of color. What does it mean? Not one and not the other theory are completely right and not completely wrong. Actually, in most species, both mechanisms are present, and this is part of the complexity of solving this kind of problems, because we are both mechanisms at the same time in most of the cases. Usually, the blues and maybe the green colors are more related to structural effects, whereas the red and orange and yellow colors are more related to chemical or pigments, the way of generating colors. So here is a summary of what I have just said. So this region, usually when you see a very, very nice blue butterfly, usually this color comes from a structural effect, and when you see species that are red, orange, yellow, usually it comes from chemical color, from pigments. But in most of the cases, both mechanisms are present. So basically, the composed colors are of mixed origin, and there is another classification which is like this. For one hand, the physical mechanism, which is related with the iridescence, and the chemical or pigmentary mechanism, which is not iridescent. What does it mean, iridescence? Iridescence is a phenomenon that takes place only in the case of a structural or physical color, and basically is identified by the change of the observed color when you change the angle of observation. So this is called iridescence. So at the first glance, if you want to identify which kind of mechanism is present, if you find iridescence in a species, then for sure there are some physical mechanisms involved. So now we move to show you some examples from nature where the structural color is evident. This first example corresponds to opals. Opals, I don't know if you have ever seen an opal, but they are characterized by different colors, even in different sections. Usually when you have one opal, you can identify there several parts with different colors. And like in this photograph. Why this color is generated? Because the structure of the opal is just like this. It's just spheres, very, very small spheres, that gives the opal this characteristic. The next question could be why we can identify different regions here with different colors if all the opal is made of spheres. So the answer to this question is that the arrangements of these spheres sometimes are tilted or inclined in some different ways. So this gives a different color because this structure made of spheres, made of, basically they are silicon spheres, they are real photonic crystal. So it has its own photonic band gaps, and depending on the structure, on the pitch, and on the arrangement, then the different colors will be reflected from the structure. Here are more examples of opals, and you can see here that the structure is very, very regular. This is not an artificial structure, it's just nature. It's just a cut of an opal. This is just another image. Then we have a different living, in this case a living species, which is the sea mouse. The sea mouse is this guy, which has this thin like hair, something like this, that you can see in the next slide, that has this very, very varying color. And you can see that depending on the light shining on it, the color is different. Here it looks like blue, and here is more yellow. And so this very thin and sharp hair are made also of a very, very complex structure. Here there is a worm that also has a structural color in some of these parts. You can see here, this is these are scanning electron microscopy images of the structure of these parts of the worm, and you can see that it's like a regular, very regular structure with holes. Here, this is one of the most studied cases of structural color, which is the Morphoretinor butterfly. These butterflies, actually you can find them in our country, in Argentina, in the north. For sure you could have seen them in Iguazu. This is the best region in our country to find them. And of course they are also in more in the north, in Peru, in Ecuador, more northern countries. These butterflies are very, they have like this size, they are big, but and they are blue, usually very, very nice and brilliant metallic blue color, iridescent color. But if you, this is a closer view of the scales, and if you make a transversal cut of the scales, you find this kind of structure. So this is a transversal cut of a scale of the butterfly. So you can see here that this is a rather complex diffraction grating, with the unit cell or the period of this grating is like a small tree, and this structure is responsible for the effects that we see in this butterfly. Here, this region that is green here is just to show that when you immerse, in this case, this part of the butterfly in a liquid with another refraction index different from one, from vacuum, then since this liquid becomes enters all the structures and can be inside this structure, then the diffraction grating changes the colors that are reflected, and this is a proof that the color in this butterfly is a structural color. There are many butterflies that have been investigated, and most of them have both effects together, the structural and the pigmentary. So in this case, for example, a closer view of the scales, you can see here that there are like green zones and blue voids or cavities in the middle of them. And then this is a scanning electron microscope image, and where you can see that the color is differently generated inside here. The structure is different from the boundaries here, and the overall effect, because we don't see this when we see a butterfly, we just see a homogeneous color. The overall effect is this one. But this is also a structural color. This is another image of another butterfly from the same family. This is another example. You can see that by now I showed opals that are not living species. I showed butterflies that are living species, worms, the sea mouse, and now also we have another example of a structural color, a structural effect, where you can see that the structure is also very, very regular. So each one of these sections are a cut of this plant. Well, these are other kind of plants, which looks blue here, and the structure is a multilayer. So the multilayer structure is also like a one-dimensional photonic crystal, and in this case, a multilayer is responsible for the coloration. Well, we have, in the case of beetles, we have many examples of structural color. In most cases, the structural color in beetles is generated by multi-layer structures. These structures are underneath some surface structure. Like here, you can see there are like bumps on the top of the surface. You can see more closer that there are here like cavities. So all these kind of features that the surface has is the responsible for the colors in the different species. This is another example of the other mechanisms that I mentioned. You remember that at the beginning I said that there is like a structural, maybe gratings and interference from one hand, and from the other hand there is a pigmentary chemical, but there was another one which was a scattering by small particles. So in this case, this is the white beetle, and they say that this is the most white thing that is available. This is the most white in the sense that it disperses light very, very homogeneously in all the wavelengths. And this is because it has like a very, very random structure. So this is another example of a beetle that is very, very interesting. This beetle is like, it has a cover, which is called elytron, but for the physicists that don't know too much about biology, just we say the cover of this Beetle. So this cover is transparent for him. Usually when it is quiet and relaxed, it looks like this. But as soon as it feels some danger, some predator coming or whatever danger situation, it starts to pour some kind of liquid inside its own body, and then since it has a structure that is now filled by another liquid with another refraction index, it changes its color. So in just a minute or so, it can change from being transparent to be completely red. So this is another evidence of structural color, but in this case it's even more interesting because it can manage its own color depending on the situation. So there are other interesting effects, other interesting species that exhibit this kind of effect. In this case, this is we should call it a polarizer beetle, something like this, because its cover actually can polarize light. So this is these two views are under different circularly polarized right-hand side or left-hand side, in this case, illumination. So their structure is such that it has like a privileged direction that makes it circularly polarized light. Well, also in mollusks we have this kind of effect. In this case, it's very obvious the iridescent effect. I think all of us have seen this kind of effect. When we move, when we change the observation angle, then the color changes, and this is also a structural effect. So up to now, I told you that there are many, many examples in nature that in which color is generated by a structural effect. So the question now would be, what is the purpose of this species to use this color? What for? So there are several answers to this question. Some of them are listed here. For example, to hide from predators. This is one reason that the species sometimes use their color or are built somehow with this color to be protected from predators. Other reason is to advertise predators that they are not good candidates. For example, there are some species that are poisonous to other species, but there is no sense to be poisonous if at the end the predator eats it. So what is the benefit? So they should let the predator know from before that they are not convenient for them. So color is a way of telling this to the predator. Another reason is for sexual recognition and reproduction and attraction. They use the color for these purposes also. And some other species use the color to collect solar radiation for certain specific function. For example, there are some species that live in very, very cold zones, so they need to collect radiation to keep their bodies warm. So this is another way of using their structure to collect radiation, and in this particular case, not only in the visible range, maybe in the infrared, for example. So we have seen that many structures are very perfect, let's say, and have many applications for the species themselves. So the humans imitate, and so humans are trying to reproduce this kind of structure. Many of them we have seen in all these weeks of our ICAM school. But basically we can divide these artificial materials into types. The one type is a photonic crystals and the other type is a metamaterials. The main difference between both of them is that in the case of the photonic crystal, the typical size of the feature of the structure should be of the same order of magnitude of the wavelength. Whereas in the case of metamaterials, the features are much smaller. So from the point of view of the material, both of them are of the same kind in the sense that both of them should be composite material. But this is a big difference. So when you deal with photonic crystals, then you need to solve the problem, the rigorous problem with all the Maxwell equation and everything, because there will be many interference effects and diffraction and everything. Whereas in the case of metamaterials, usually one can represent the response of the material by an effective medium dielectric constant or something like this. So the point is that although we can start thinking of these kinds of materials from the photonic point of view or for the visible range, these materials are scalable. So we can not only build or design materials to work on the visible range, but also we can then scale them to be able for different devices in completely different applications. For example, in the millimeter wave regime or microwave regime. So here is just, I will be doing a very quick introduction on photonic crystals. This is a scheme of one-dimensional, two-dimensional, and three-dimensional photonic crystals. The different colors here represent different materials. Usually in photonic crystals, both materials are dielectric. And so what is special about photonic crystals is that photonic crystal has the characteristic of generating band gaps. What are the band gaps? Basically, we can say that band gaps are a range of the electromagnetic spectrum where propagation through the photonic crystal is forbidden. So, if you come with a plane wave, an electromagnetic wave, to the photonic crystal, then if you are within this gap, then the wave will be completely reflected. So, from this point of view, these materials are very attractive because you can design them to have the band gap where you want, just choosing the size, the shape, and the materials of the composite. So this is a little bit of history of the photonic crystals. The first photonic crystal was built in 1991, so I would say that this research topic is very young. And the first sample of a built photonic crystal has these holes of a diameter of 6 millimeters made in a ceramic block. So, of course, as usual, we start making a structure from the easiest part. So, the easiest part was doing these holes, just making them with a machine. And so this was the first structure that was made, and the proof was that this structure rejects microwaves of this range of frequencies in all directions. So this was a proof of that this structure behaves like a photonic crystal. So this is very nice, but if we want to make band gaps in the visible range, then we should go and make features of the structure much smaller, of the size of the order of the wavelength, incident wavelength. So this is the challenge that appeared later, but of course from since then, since 1991 up to now, a lot of work has been done in this direction, and photonic crystal has been built even in the visible. In this image, you can see here that this is a regular structure, a photonic crystal, but here there is a zone like different from the rest of the structure, which is called a defect. A defect is a different part of the photonic crystal where you can propagate light or radiation through it. So the interesting thing is that if you can propagate inside this defect light, then if this defect is surrounded by the photonic crystal, then the light cannot escape. So because it will be reflected by the photonic crystal because of the band gap, so then the only way is just to propagate through the defect. So this is a very good tool to make waveguides, for example. So here are some other examples of photonic crystals. This is here you can see a linear defect. It's not only one localized region, but a complete line defect. This and this one are photonic crystal fibers that have been also developed during these years. Photonic crystal fibers are very good at guiding light because of this effect that I was telling you. So basically, for example, here you can see that there is a regular structure, but inside that we should have also one of these dark cylinders. This cylinder is missing there. So through this defect, the light is propagated. Why it is not escaping to the other parts of the fiber? Because the other parts are just photonic crystals in the photonic band gap. So here are some other artificial structures that maybe if you compare this structure with the one I showed you a few slides before of the opal, I don't know which one is more regular or better, right? So here is a summary of the effects that you can have when you have a defect. Here is a localized defect, so you can concentrate energy there, and here you can guide waves. For example, you can design the structure for example, guiding by the defect one wavelength and reflecting or propagating the other wavelength. So this acts not only by like a waveguide, but also like a filter at the same time. So this is the principle of the photonic crystal fiber, here you can see better what I was telling in the previous slide, that the black, the hole here is missing, so the light is guided exactly by this defect. And here also the structure is somehow altered here in the center. So in both cases, in all cases, the guidance principle is the defect in the photonic crystal. This is much more efficient than the regular fibers that are schematized here, where the guiding principle there is total internal reflection. But then you lose some energy that in this case is much more efficient. So there are many applications of this structure, for example in microelectronics, miniaturization of microchips, well, this is like the bad part of what we have today for the computer, for example. And this is the good part that we can bring with these photonic devices. So, for example, if we change our microelectronics world by photonic telecommunications, then we can use light as the information carrier. So in this case, we have many advantages. So one of them is that we avoid dissipation. That is exactly one of the big problems of the microelectronic-based computer. And also, the speed of information transport increases. And now it is somehow limited by the chips that are used usually. So now we turn to the other type of materials, artificial materials that can be built inspired on the biological structure. So these are some examples that we already discussed, some effects that I think Ivan, Guillermo, some of the speakers here already talked about negative refraction. So this is just to show you that with this taking as a basis, as an inspiration, the biological structure, you can go further and use all these structures for our own purpose. So, to summarize this part, I told you about the origin of structural color and pigmentary color. So the conclusion of this part would be that in general, in biological structure, we have both mechanisms altogether. Then I show you some examples in nature that exhibit structural color. And then I talk a little bit about artificial structures that we can make based or inspired by the natural structures, such as photonic crystals, photonic crystal fibers, metamaterials, and all the applications that metamaterials might have. So to conclude this first part of my presentation, we can say that natural photonic crystals that are present in many systems, many species, from one hand, if we investigate them, then we will learn a lot more about their biological functions. Many things that were not known by biologists, we can just help them to understand the behavior of the species. On the other hand, to study these structures can help to improve our technological development. And of course, there is a connection between both of them, because the technological developments, for example, doing a better microscope or better way of analyzing things can also help to understand biological functions, which is also where we are also improving. So these biological structures are a source of inspiration for the design of new materials and devices. And of course, there is a whole world to be discovered. This is a very, very new branch of research. So here is a phrase by Albert Einstein. I leave you with this phrase. Thank you very much.